Okay, so absolutely fantastic to be here today with this latest episode of the Data Transformation series from the Digital Transformation Lab in UCC with the excellent Christina Finlay. Christina and myself caught up for a chat a few weeks ago, and I was only saying afterwards it was a pity we didn't record that because some really interesting topics came up. Hopefully you'll remember them, Christina, and if not, I'll remember them. Christina, do you want to tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Thanks for the introduction, or the introduction to our conversation before. I'm currently Director of Data and Analytics at Nest, and Nest is a government corporation that is responsible now for the pensions of 11 million workers. Nest was put in place about 10 years ago when the government of the UK put in place a workforce pension policy that meant that every employer needed to start saving, help their employees to start saving. So now we're at a point where we have 11.5 million members, which is about 1/3 of the workforce in the UK. But we know that actually the majority of them are not going to have the kind of pension, the kind of retirement that they might dream of. So we're always working to kind of give people a better retirement. I head up data analytics and a massive transformation program at Nest. Prior to Nest, I was at the National Trust, where I did a very similar thing, help the organization to find better ways to make its members happy, have them shopping and eating better and doing all the things that they love to do. I guess my key passions are people and culture change. I love to drive personalization in an organization, so I'll see where this conversation takes us today.
Yeah. And the good news is I have no idea where this conversation is going to go either.
Okay.
So let's have a bit of fun with it. Christina, I'm going to start with a very broad question, really. You spoke about those experiences you have and having to transform organizations. Where would you start if you're going to an organization? Where would you start with these large-scale transformation?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and the thing is, it always starts with where does the company want to go. So whether it was Hovis in my past, or the National Trust or Nest, it's what is the company objective? What is the company outcome? So at Nest, for example, the line that we have up on the wall of the organization is helping millions to have a better retirement, and so that's where my strategy starts. That's where the transformation starts. Is how does data help us to get there? How does a digital transformation help us to get there? Not, ooh, here are the things I need to do. Oh goodness, I need to put a data platform in. It's no, how is data going to help us to do that? Let me start there. And I've got 4 pillars to the data strategy, which are absolutely tied directly to that. And that's what helps us kind of put the right things in place to help the organization.
Ooh, and the obvious question are, what are the 4 pillars?
I feel like I should have written them down. I'm gonna be paraphrasing. So the first one is about we need to look. It's about holistically looking at the organization. And I say that one because one of the barriers we have is that we're a very siloed organization. All of our data is very siloed. So we needed to holistically look at the organization, continually improve the customer experience. So with that, it's about having the data in place and having the kind of circuitous look at continual improvement of the customer experience. There's one about managing the risk. And that's specifically when we think about people data, when we think about an organization. The pension organization is a very risk-averse organization. How do we manage and think about risk? And the last one is about enabling and empowering an analyst community. When I came in, the analysts were very siloed, and how could I get them working together to achieve that goal together instead of working in silos?
What's really interesting, actually, again, and it ties in with what you said earlier, Christine, is you start with the organization. I think your first mention sort of the more technical side of data was that 4th pillar, but you spoke about, the holistic view of the organization, look at opportunities for improving the customer experience. Then maybe there's the risk bit. And I've also heard you say, and it may have been during our conversation or elsewhere, Christina, that not all organizations really need to be data driven. Sometimes being data enabled is enough. Can you unpack that a bit for us?
Yeah, I mean, the data driven, the data world we're massive on buzzwords. And I mean, we're not alone in this. Marketing is great at buzzwords, but data, we're always trying to sell something and something new and have a new catchword. And data driven is one of those things. And to me, when I went to our exco and said, here's the data strategy, let's talk about where we want to go with data. How do we want data to help us help millions have a better retirement? Do we want to be data driven or data enabled? And they said, oh gosh, we don't understand that. We don't understand the difference between those two things. So this is how I define it. For when I think about data driven, I think about an organization, and I'll call out some of the fintech companies, Monzo, for example, or Uber is a data-driven organization. They look at the data and they do exactly what the data tells them. They often have data that is quite predictive, that is quite stable, that they can have AI models, they can have machine learning models that genuinely can predict the future and help them to drive their organization in a way that is just about data. To me, data enabled is an organization that where subject matter expertise and I'll say the ethics or the weight of the organization, or there still has to be a lot of debate that the data can't tell you what the future will hold. That you genuinely have to go, okay, I see that data, and we will use that data in our decision making, but actually there's too much at play. That data can't be the only factor in our decision making. And for me, that's what data enabled is an organization that says, yes, we will use that data, we'll do everything that we can to use that data to make a decision, but we also have to use our judgment. And for me, that a lot of the organizations that I've worked with or that I've been talking to other people about need to be data enabled and not data driven.
Yeah, and doesn't that tie in really nicely with this, the complex world we're in? Even when we might convince ourselves we can predict and we can prescribe, very often there's that human element that really throws the whole thing back up in the air. And I can imagine, you used the word empathy a lot, Christina. I know it's very important to you that we need to understand the people and maybe build solutions for people that work with people. Can you maybe tell us a bit about that focus on empathy?
I think so. Empathy is to me a leader's greatest skill, and I feel like I'm gonna probably take us off on a little bit of a tangent, because for me there's something about the kind of the first part of what you're saying is in decision making and empathy. Actually, there's something about the people that are actually making decisions. So when I'm kind of saying I want to have a holistic view of the business so that we can make better decisions, it's like how do those people who are making those decisions, how can I empathize with them so that we can make sure that we put the right information in front of them? When I think about the second pillar, and it's about human empathy for our customers, how can I make sure that I understand what our customers need? I'm never going to predict what any of our members are going to do. Genuinely, there are so many different factors in their lives that while I can say we want them to have a better future, we want them to save more, or whatever it is, we're never going to understand all the things that are happening in their lives to help them to save more. And then my third kind of bit where empathy is really important is in the team. And I say that with the kind of my analytics team and empathy for them. For me, how I build that empathy, how I think about that, and where that is a factor in kind of, the transformation kind of that I think about is completely different. So with decision makers, my empathy is let me put myself in their shoes before I step into the boardroom. How am I thinking about making sure I put the right information in front of them? How am I making sure I'm having conversations with as many of them as I can so that I put the right information in front of them so that I get what I need out of that meeting? And that is really important. I'll go to the third one, the analysts. How do I empathize with them? I need to make a big change with how they think and how they work. All the employees of Nest, but my analysts more than anything, I have to think about what their current state is, what their mindset is. And for me, that kind of people change is really one-on-one. It's really what's going on in your life. How can I make sure that you see the future, that you are changing what you do and how you work and how you deliver information so that we all together create the same transformation? And then the third bit of empathy for our customers, for me, that is in my team. I have not only the data teams and the analytics teams and the business intelligence, I also have customer insight. So for me, in a data transformation, in a data-led enabling the organization in a different way, it's not just about data. It's not just about digital. It's actually about market research and how that can help us to tell the why. Because no matter what, when you're thinking about empathy, why is the most important question, and data can rarely tell us why. When we're doing any kind of transformation, any kind of change program, the why is the thing. And I feel like Simon Sinek all of a sudden, but but the why is the thing that motivates us and gets us moving and gets us changing. So how, in my 3 customer groups, my 3 groups of people, how do I use my empathy to help me to drive that why?
That's powerful. Yeah, and definitely, you can hear the passion in you for understanding the why, but also when we go into a lot of sort of data teams, data units, we've a lot of people that really are more inspired by the how, the tools, the latest technologies, the data itself. How do you nurture a unit like you're talking about that will focus more on that empathy when it's required, Christina?
I can only say it's hard. It's hard, and it's true. That's a very good question. The how versus the why. When people are motivated by the how do you get them motivated by the why? And it is how do I drive the empathy with them? How do I get them thinking? And they do love the how. Although I've got to say they don't love the how as much as I thought they would.
Yeah.
The group of people that I have, for the most part, genuinely have bought into the vision of the company. How do we help millions have a better retirement? And they have bought into that as their why. Is why are they at Nest? And it is to do that. I think for me, the motivator for a lot of them is that I've been working on is efficiency, which feels quite rational. I guess it's appealing to the rational. That's the thing. It's efficiency and productivity, and less than about the fun we could have if we're working together. It's actually, can you see in a logical way that there are 3 of you doing the same piece of work and each spending a week on it? And wouldn't it be better if you spent that week together, and you might actually put your work together and have a better outcome for the member? So finding those ways and it's beyond tools. It's always very human. But it's finding rational ways to connect to people to show them that the why is important.
Yeah.
That was probably very circuitous, but that got me there in the end. Yeah.
No, I get it. So really, it's that they come in. They really have to understand, that the vision of the organization and the difference that the organization wants to make. In this case, to the employees, and the need for pensions, etc. And I also recall you before, Christina, talking about the power of not just data, and sometimes when we're in market insights, we can lean very heavily on data, and it drives a lot of decisions. But you also said about really putting that data into stories.
Yeah.
And
I think the storytelling, and this is the bit that's actually can be quite hard for analysts to see. Analysts so often want the world to come to them. They want the world to kind of understand the depth of the very complex and very interesting models that they do. But so many people in the world are not quite as numerate or complicated or technical, and so the challenge is, how do you get the analysts to start thinking about how they can impact people, how they can tell a story? And we use storytelling so often, it's another buzzword in the data world, how we can tell a story so that we drive curiosity of people. And for me, one of the most impactful ways to do that has been to bring market research and customer insight into data. So that for me, what happens is that by merging those teams, what happens is that the customer insight team, they'll do some market research and they'll come up with oh gosh, I'm really curious about this. They'll have some qualitative research that will come up with some insights, and they'll go, I wonder if that's important. I wonder if we can see that in the data. Then hand over to the data team. The data team will do some analysis that will say, oh, actually, yes, that is a really important driver of this thing. But then give it back to the insight team at the end, because the insight team can then take that model and say, understand the complexity of the data, and you've made a lot of sense out of it. You've said, here are the 5 factors are really important. But actually, to make that data impactful, what we need to do is to layer some stories on top of it. So then when I give it back to the market research team and say, can you now drive some research around the factors that we find in our model, so that research then, instead of presenting a data model and saying, aren't we, we are so clever, genuinely so clever, you might not understand this 60% and this 45% and here this kind of with this factor and these probabilities. What you will understand is that Daisy, can't save for her retirement because she's got this kind of loan and this kind of loan. And actually she's in that 60%. 60% of our population is like Daisy. Think about Daisy now when you're making a decision. And that 45% actually, well, that's Tom. And Tom, he's got these troubles, and that's why he can't save for retirement. So for me, data storytelling is not just about the data. It's about how can you connect it to people. And that's what helps to drive the holistic view of the business. And that's what helps to drive people genuinely making decisions with our members at the heart of it, is that they think about Daisy and they think about Tom. They don't necessarily think about the data. They don't necessarily think about the, all the clever work that went into it. But actually that's driving a decision. That is storytelling driving a decision because they want to help people. And everyone has that human instinct to help people.
Yeah, it's lovely. So it's evidence-based storytelling, really, about putting the soul back into data. I think is a Brené Brown.
Into data. Yeah,
lovely. Yeah. And come here, Christine, you create these stories. Then, like, what are they used for? Who uses them? Then, where do they go to from beyond your team? Is it for you to convince senior leaders? Is it as marketing campaigns? Or where do they go?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say this is the work I'm kind of in progress of doing with my team at Nest, but what I did do at National Trust. So probably the first place to go is the marketing team. And in the organizations that I work in, you often have a marketing team and a product team. So the marketing team will actually drive the campaigns. And so they might say, ooh, Daisy, I can see what we can do for Daisy is do an A/B test on a marketing campaign and see, this hypothesis, what's going to get Daisy to take some action in a different way. And we'll do a different thing for that group of Tom. And 40% will drive a different kind of model for them. You take it to the product team, which at the National Trust was the membership team or the fundraising team or the online shop team, and you say, actually, what we need to do is to drive some product development. Do we need a new membership product? Do we need a new fundraising product? Should we have some new, whatever it might be in the online shop? So those are the two big audiences, kind of the big ways to drive things, which are kind of in a marketing space. But then it's a matter of taking it to the executive team to say, actually, as an organization, do we want to put our customer at the center of things? Is that what any organization that has a customer, that's always what they say. Well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to help Daisy and Tom? How are we going to make sure that we are thinking about them in all of our decisions? So inspiring the executive team with that kind of narrative really, really helps. And then the third one is then taking it to the organization, and with that we did that at National Trust with our business intelligence hub. I've forgotten what we called it now, NT Analytics, and with our business intelligence hub, and embedding not just the data into the BI hub, but also the audience research, also layering on those stories and pictures and videos that helped us to help somebody who was a property or anyone making decision in the whole organization to go, oh, I see who I'm making this decision for. Mm-hmm. So all of that kind of in progress at Nest, but implemented at National Trust, that genuinely helps to put our customer at the center of things.
Yeah, that's lovely. And it also reminds me, Christina, there's a big issue that's been highlighted at the moment, the whole data literacy issue, that when we give, whether it's dashboards to people, that very often they have very limited impact in terms of changing decisions. I'm intrigued by this idea. Maybe we need to give them more stories and maybe less focus on the dashboards, definitely for some cohorts of people. And I'm just wondering, have you noticed, do the stories have more impact than the actual raw data, or vice versa? And does it depend on the audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to depend on the audience. There are some audiences that just eat the data, just love it. So for me, the literacy, it does come down to those dashboards and how you present information on those dashboards. The goal has to be to drive curiosity, and the only way to do that is to make it relevant. So your dashboards have to shift and change depending on the audience that they're going to, if you're going to have some kind of impact. And with that, I'll use an example of we don't all have, but lots of us have an Apple Watch, or I've got a ring that's got my that drives my data, my health data. I look at my app first thing in the morning, and I look at how I slept, and I look at how I kind of, I get a score that says, here's how ready you are. Thank you, Ura. I love my ring. And because that is so relevant, and my mom has an Apple Watch. She's 86 years old, has an Apple Watch. She would never call herself a data literate person. And I'm not sure how good that word is at describing. So my mom would not say I'm data literate, but genuinely, my mom knows her blood pressure. She knows she knows how to read her sleep data. She knows how to read all of these charts on her watch or on her phone. And to make a decision about, oh gosh, I shouldn't have any salt this week, or I should do this, or you know what, I need to go for a walk this morning. If my mom can do that and kind of absorb and kind of whatever, to me, absolutely, dashboards, if they are relevant, if they give us the information that we need, and if we are motivated to drive that decision making, absolutely, I think we can make people make the right decisions, as long as we're giving them relevant information and the right information at the right time. Which is hard. That's not easy.
It is, yeah. But there's a lovely nuance in what you said, I think, as well, Christina, in the way you're saying, nearly, yeah, ultimately we want to drive better decision making, but in a way, the intermediate step is that we need to drive curiosity, where people start asking questions of themselves, of their unit, of their organization, of their own lives, and then afterwards the data-driven decision making comes. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, the curiosity is the thing we are trying to drive right now, is curiosity, and that is hard. And that comes down to putting the right little tidbits of information out. We're doing that with little kind of, in front of at the beginning of we have our Exco does a weekly talk. So at the start of the talk, before it goes on, we have a quote from one of our members that's just ooh, actually, that's really interesting. Let me find out more. Here's where to go to find out more. It's driving curiosity is absolutely the first and biggest step, because once you start doing that, then people start getting an appetite for learning more, and learning is what literacy is all about.
Yeah, cool. And it ties in then with another point I think I've heard you make as well, Christina. So we provide maybe data to drive curiosity. The data becomes maybe evidence for people maybe to change or to want to change, etc. Yeah. And I've also heard you say that you have started to use the word data less and evidence more. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's very interesting, that insight.
Well, those of us in the data world think data is amazing and interesting, and we find it fascinating. But lots of other people don't agree. And as soon as you say the word data, they kind of turn off, or they think it's boring. And I think that if you want to have an organization that uses information to make decisions, you have to remove any possible barrier to doing that. You have to make it so easy for them to get information. You have to put it in front of their face. You have to shake them almost to get them to do that. If using the word data is a blocker, you have to remove that. The other thing is that within that data, I can so easily say data is everything. I can say market research is data, qualitative information is data. I can say, surveys are data or whatever, but not everybody agrees. And I want to do everything I can to remove those barriers. Evidence seems to be a word that people can see that makes sense, that does include all these different things. So by removing the word data, putting evidence in, it removes a blocker and ensures that people are thinking it in a more holistic way.
Yeah, and I like that idea of the blockers, that maybe sometimes the word data becomes a blocker. And in a way, this might also explain then as well, Christina, you said that sometimes we wrap it in stories and people consume the stories. It's an easier way. There's less blockers when it comes to stories, but at the same time, we've evidence behind those stories. And I really like that. And I suppose
smuggling it in, I think, is the way.
Smuggling, it's a Trojan horse.
It's like smuggling broccoli into mac and cheese so that kids will eat it.
Yeah. And actually, that idea of smuggling it in also, I think, opens up another line that I think we discussed before, that that it isn't about really, in your mind, a data-driven culture or a data culture. It's ultimately about just a more effective culture.
Yeah, I think for me that data does three things. And again, I'm using the word data where I should probably use the word evidence even. But being an evidence-based organization or a data-enabled organization, it creates value, because we know that actually knowing things can add value, can create value, can do new things, create new products that are more interesting to our customers. It manages risk, which we all need to do. We need to make sure that we see things before they happen so that we can stop them from happening. And then it just makes us more efficient. Because when you think about organizations, and we've all worked for those organizations that struggle to make decisions, and there's debate, and it all feels very, very subjective. As soon as you put fact in the room, you would hope that in most organizations, that it is true in most organizations, as soon as you have the fact and the right facts, that actually it makes for much, much more effective decision making. And that is where data drives efficiency, and it does it really, really well.
I'm intrigued because there's some really nice nuances in what you're saying, Christina. How different do you think you are in relation to data? You know, what do you think are your unique perspectives when people see you in operation when it comes to data? What would they say? You know, we really remember Christina because she is different in terms of.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would say it's because of my people focus, my empathy. That I'm not I think I am not a technology-driven data leader. And I think there are lots of very, very clever technology-driven data leaders. I've come up through the chain through insight, through driving business value, through insight. So that's a very different way. So when people say that I'm different, I think they don't usually say that I've got a people focus. I'm the one who says I've got a people focus. They talk about my passion, which I just kind of go, oh, but you know, I'm a values-driven organization or values-driven person. And I guess that is what comes through. That passion is what comes through. That through my leadership, I'm able to drive my own values and connect to my own values. And my number one value is joy. And that's where passion comes out. I think that makes me quite different. That I'm a joyful leader. I want to create joy for the people around me. And that's important.
Yeah, and I suppose related to that then, Christina, are there things that annoy you about where the data sort of space is going, you know, in terms of some of its focus?
I mean, there's so much focus on technology, and we can do an extraordinary amount without changing any of our technology. So you can have a very small budget and create an extraordinary impact in a team or in an organization. You can, of course, spend millions and do things maybe in a more efficient way or whatever, but genuinely, I think so often data leaders will come in and they'll go, oh gosh, we need to change this or change this. And that often happens when they sit in the technology function. When a data leader sits in a more business function, i.e., you know, I sit with the strategy kind of area. Definitely the focus often is much more on creating business value first and not spending the time, you know, putting in I am putting in a new data platform, but I waited 1.5 years in the team. We do need one, but actually there was an awful lot we could do before putting in a data platform. We didn't need to start with that. And for me, that is one of the best ways to show value right away as a leader, come into the organization and say, actually, we can do things differently without spending millions of pounds. And we can create some value, and that gets a little bit more buy-in from leadership. So yeah, technology sometimes. Technology is very helpful as well, but sometimes can be a Trojan horse, I guess.
That's right. Yeah, and you're right. There's definitely a place for it, but when we look at let's say change through the lens of technology, it's very often big budgets, you know, big delivery timelines, etc. Whereas I've heard you now and also before talk about that there's a lot we can do now, and I know you're an advocate of this sort of try it, test it, learn, and sort of pivot. What does that look like in terms of how you get teams and projects working? Because sometimes up front, you know, at a senior level, we want to know the budget up front, whereas you're talking about no, let's try something and figure it out and move along. What does this look like?
I think so So it's back to the people. So we can all say technology change, great, yes, and let's have millions of pounds, but there's people, process, and technology. And for me, the changing the people and getting them working in a different way can create much more value. We all like to talk about agile. In the end, agile is almost a mindset. That obviously there is if you want to run things in a strict agile way, there's a whole process and methodology around that. For me, the agile in kind of the soft sense is, how do we test and learn? How do we iterate? How do we put something in process that delivers a minimum viable product? I love that because that means less risk. It means let's try something, and if it works, great, then we can keep iterating and make it better. If it doesn't work, we haven't spent hours and hours and hours and weeks and weeks and weeks building something that has no value, or building something that didn't work out. For me, the making change happen, that iterating to change. Yes, obviously the budget kind of thing is you have to, at some point you have to ask for the budget, or you have to get people to trust you enough. But if you can get people to work together in a way that creates something, at least then you have something you can say, here's the thing. It's a small kind of prototype of a thing. Now, can you see the value of that? Now, will you invest, not millions of pounds, but invest money in that as a project so that we can keep working on it? But to get people to work in that way, ooh, that's hard. That's hard because it's a risk. And when you work in a risk-averse organization, people are really terrified of it. You have to give them confidence. You have to feel like, yeah, you're going to try this thing. It might work. It might not work. That's going to be hard. That's going to be hard for you to do. But believe me, I've got your back. And that's our job as a leader, is to show them the way, say, here's where we're going. And second, to have their back to take barriers away and to make sure that they don't feel exposed, so that they feel like they can take risks and put their brilliant skills to use.
Fantastic. So in a way, you nearly have a budget which you can put towards sort of piloting ideas before you go back out looking for that bigger budget. So it's de-risking it. I'm not going to ask for the big budgets until I pilot things nearly locally. Lovely idea, and I suppose it's really interesting, especially when you're in a financial organization, because people sometimes think the business case is the way we reduce risk, that it's a well-grounded evidence base. But in a way, you're saying no, let's try things on the ground first so that we can build that business case later. And I think you're right then, Christina, the word trust is so important. How do you get someone to trust? Let's say you're new into an organization, and you're talking about data and a new way of working with data. How do you build that trust? What advice would you give to others, Christina?
I think so when I came into the organization, the first thing I did was had one-on-ones with all of my peers, and that gave me right, I can see immediately, you see opportunity, and you have to show them that you can deliver something. So that's where it's like doing small things really helps. You have to show them that you see their problems, and that you see that you can help them with their problems, that what you are doing connects to them. And that for me is the number one way that I would say to build trust is genuinely to empathize with the person you're talking to. And it is one-on-one connections, it is relationships, it is networks. For me, building trust is not something you can do just by standing up in front of a room full of people or saying things. You genuinely have to build relationships. And that's hard in COVID times.
Yeah, especially, and I really like that, Christine. So this sort of starting small, piloting, it helps to build empathy because you're working on the ground with teams. It helps to de-risk because it's a smaller initiative, but it also builds trust. So I really like that agile approach you're advocating. Christina, I'm also watching the clock, and there's something I really, really want to get back to, because I know you mentioned it me before, and it's still in my head. You referred to, was it 80 to 90% of data people very often are introverts. How do you nurture this group? So especially if you're talking about building empathy, being out there, maybe even trying to understand the world out there, how do you work with that group?
I mean, I'm an introvert as well, so that's probably the easiest thing, is that I do empathize quite genuinely and automatically. The first thing is to build self-awareness, to understand, for them to understand. And not everybody does. Not everybody understands what being an introvert is. Not everybody understands that they themselves are an introvert. So I usually have a team do Myers-Briggs, and there's various different tests. It's not just about Myers-Briggs, but genuinely to understand themselves and kind of where they sit on that introvert-extrovert spectrum. It took me a very, very long time to recognize that I am an introvert. And yet I have learned, in order to do the job that I want to do, I have to put on a lot of extroverted kind of behaviors and learn skills and get out there and do things, because that's how I get to do the job that I love to do. But it exhausts me. And so what I realize is that with the team and working with the team, one is helping them to be aware that they are an introvert. And for those extroverts in the team, be aware that the reason that they're so exhausted is that they're trying to kind of get other people to be like them, rather than empathizing. Again, empathy, empathizing with people who are a little bit different. And so first self-awareness, understanding who you are, and that your energy and where you get your energy is the right thing. How do you build your energy? So introverts, the thing, it's not that they're incapable. It's technically it's a preference, not an absolute die-hard thing. So how do you get your energy? So one, build them up so that they have energy, rather than work draining their energy. And that's often by doing things that they love, by being around people that they love. Introverts, just because you're an introvert doesn't mean that you don't like connection, and often it's easier for them to connect with other introverts. So what I find is that while introverts might be challenged, facing into the organization, actually when they're together, they're talk, which is lovely. So that and building their energy in that way. I often will have, if there are extroverts in the teams, they're the ones that are the translator. They're the business partners externally, so the introverts can be I'm just going to pipe in where I need to, but somebody else is doing that relationship building. And again, and also that the introverts love to be one-on-one. And that's a more comfortable space for them. So don't throw them into a meeting if they're not comfortable, or if they don't have the energy that day. Give them lots of time to prepare, because once you have that preparation, introverts are reflectors. So how do you make sure that they have the time to reflect, that they have the content of the meeting ahead of time so that they can reflect? Because what will happen so often, if you throw an introvert into a meeting, they will get through the meeting, and then just as you're walking out the door, the biggest insight will come out of their mouth, just as you're walking out the door to the end. And I remember having somebody at the National Trust, it was always that. It was like, oh, if you'd only had that 10 minutes ago, that just would have nailed that meeting. So how do you give them content ahead of time so that they have time to think and reflect and come up with those great insights so that they will speak up in a meeting? All of those things, I feel like the expert teams tend to be introverted. It's a thing that it's a test and learn with what's going to work for your own team. But I feel like I've got lots of tips to do that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You've definitely thought very deeply about that, Christina, and maybe comes from your own, sort of associated with being an introvert yourself. So I think that's really fascinating. Christina, I know I promised that we'd be out the doors, sort of, within a certain period of time. I just really want to give you the opportunity, maybe to tell the audience about where they can find out more about you, Christina. I know I follow you on LinkedIn. I see your content there. Where can people find out more about what you do and where I suppose where you engage in terms of social media or elsewhere?
I've got to say, LinkedIn is the place. I don't do Twitter. I mean, I Twitter. This is an introvert thing. Twitter overwhelms me, and Twitter's way too much and whatever. So definitely LinkedIn is the place. I do quite a bit of speaking at different conferences. I can't think of the ones I've got coming up, but I know I've got some through autumn. That definitely, and some of them are free conferences as well. That if people want to go, I'm definitely around. But I keep my network updated through LinkedIn.
That's fantastic. And again, I'd recommend people follow you on LinkedIn. I think the insights are fantastic. And I know, Christina, we could have spoken for so much longer about so many of those topics. So I'd advise people, if they want to know more about those topics, to follow you on the likes of LinkedIn. Christina, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, no, thank you. This was really lovely. Really great.
I really enjoyed it. And I'm sure our audience did as well.